1. Introduction. Rosep view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosep view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXZG November 10, 2025 snap elections should be held regarding Trump actions. In Webisode 57DHXZG1, Trump gives Hungary a reprieve on sanctions after meeting with Orban. 2 Those Americans going hungry because of Trump. 3 Senate votes to advance measure to end shutdown in a 60-40 vote on Sunday night. A group of Democrats broke their party blockade to vote with Republicans. 4 In Alaska and Hawaii, higher food prices intensified snap anxiety. 5 United Kingdom. 2 Top BBC leaders quit over editing of Trump documentary main content. 0 Rosep view. In summary, Trump is giving economic relief of $40 billion to dictator Javier Milei of Argentina, and Trump is giving economic reprieve to dictator Viktor Orban of Hungary at a time when he refuses to release food stamps to hungry Americans and is appealing decisions of judges and is perhaps starving Americans across the nation. Although he has been ordered to release already tax-paid funds for food stamps by American judges in Wisconsin, people are turning in their animals to local humane societies because they cannot afford to feed both themselves and their pets. The editor of Rosep and her husband donated pet food to their local humane society. In response, the editor of Rosep met a woman on a bus on Halloween who was bracing herself to ration food and money through the month of November. As stated before, the American people have paid taxes for the SNAP program, and Trump withholding payment of SNAP benefits to Americans in need is illegal. In a recent poll, 52% believed Republicans were responsible for the shutdown, and only 42% believed Democrats were responsible for the shutdown. The recent elections on November 4, 2025 showed that the Democratic Party opposing Trump triumphed across the nation. Too bad that the United States, unlike the United Kingdom, cannot compel Trump to hold a snap election based on Trump unpopularity and Trump lack of representation of the wishes of the people, but Trump has got his tentacles into the workings of even the state TV, the BBC in the United Kingdom, and compelled BBC heads to resign over their coverage of Trump in a documentary in a case eerily similar to that of CBS in America. Trump associates also threatened diplomats from around the world, compelling the diplomats to retreat from a fee on air-polluting cargo ships, which would have slowed worldwide movement toward global warming and would have slowed destructive climate change. Countries around the world are taking a sigh of relief at Trump not attending the COP30 climate change fighting conference in Belém, Brazil for the next 2 weeks, because the only reason Trump would attend would be to create chaos and prevent progress among nations to slow climate change. 1 Trump gives Hungary a reprieve on sanctions after meeting with Orban. The United States has imposed sanctions on nations buying Russian oil, but President Viktor Orban successfully argued that Hungary had few other options. President Trump met with Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary on Friday at the White House. Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. The New York Times, November 8, 2025. President Trump has granted Hungary a 1-year exemption from sanctions the United States has imposed on countries buying Russian oil after meeting with the Hungarian Prime Minister at the White House on Friday. The extension was part of a series of agreements that had come out of the meeting between Trump and Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The sanctions are aimed at pressuring Russia to end its war in Ukraine. The exemption marks a victory for Orban, a populist autocrat and longtime ally of Trump, who is facing again one of the toughest election battles of his career. Orban announced the deal on social media shortly after the White House meeting. Hungary also agreed to purchase liquefied natural gas from the United States with contracts totaling about $600 million. In his social media post, Orban wrote that Trump had guaranteed full sanction exemptions for 2 of the major pipelines in Hungary, the Turkish Stream and Friendship, allowing Hungary to continue providing families with the lowest energy prices in Europe. Heading into the meeting, Orban had maintained that U.S. sanctions imposed last month on the 2 largest energy companies in Russia over the war in Ukraine threatened to collapse the Hungarian sluggish economy. Hungary gets much of its energy from Russia, and on Friday, Orban reiterated that it had fewer options than its European neighbors because the country relies heavily on pipelines. On Friday, after Orban boasted of a new golden age of diplomatic relations between the 2 countries, Trump signaled that he was sympathetic to the plight of Hungary when he said he would consider an exemption even as he was poised to grant the exemption for Hungary. Trump chastised other European countries, saying that he was disturbed they were still buying Russian oil. The exemption was a notable concession by Trump. The sanctions are among the most significant measures that the United States has taken against the Russian energy sector since the beginning of the war, and the only leverage Trump has been willing to wield against President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia for months. Trump has pressured European countries to stop purchasing oil, a major source of funding for the military campaign of Russia. Hungary imports 86% of its oil from Russia, an amount that has increased since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. According to the Atlantic Council Research Group in Washington, Orban has openly sympathized with Putin and, like Trump, has broken with much of Europe by calling for Ukraine to cede more land to Russia to secure a ceasefire. 1 Hungarian leader says he wants to hire Caroline Levitt after she rips fake news in impromptu takedown. Viktor Orban jokingly asked Trump if he can hire Caroline Levitt following her takedown of reporters at White House meeting. Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. Fox News, November 7, 2025. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban quipped during a bilateral meeting at the White House that he wants to hire Press Secretary Caroline Levitt after she delivered an impromptu takedown of the media for spreading fake news over American affordability concerns. Caroline, the Prime Minister asked, would like you to work for him in Hungary? Trump said Friday after Orban was seen leaning toward Trump and asking him, can I get her for us? Trump said the media has refused to cover the economic wins because the reporters are fake news before Orban interjected that he would like to hire Levitt. You know what, that is a very good decision you just made, Trump jokingly told Orban after he said he wanted to hire Levitt. Please do not leave us, Caroline. To those Americans going hungry because of Trump excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulate Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson November 10, 2025 in the back and forth on Friday. The administration appears to have opened up state payments for SNAP, and several states received their full payments while others did. Not states that received full payments work to get that funding through to beneficiaries' electronic benefit transfer EBT cards. Immediately astonishing how hard this administration is working to keep people hungry. It is clear they are trying to maximize public suffering in hopes of getting people to blame Democrats for that suffering, but it is transparently the White House working overtime to keep the suffering going. This seems to be USDA howling into the void after its terrible communications led many states to think that they were free to do what USDA should have told them to do all along. I do not see how USDA can do anything to the states. He wrote, since the error was not a systems error or mistaken issuance, he speculated that the memo was an attempt to intimidate states that are considering issuing full November benefits. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, a Democrat, simply posted on social media, "No." Tonight, Trump attended an NFL football game between the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions after ESPN reported that he wants the Commanders to name their new stadium after him. Attendees soundly booed him tonight. The news is swirling about Democratic senators agreeing to a deal to end the government shutdown, but so far the contours of such an agreement are not clear. 3 Senate votes to advance measure to end shutdown. In a 60-40 vote on Sunday night, the Senate cleared the way for a spending deal to end the government shutdown. A group of Democrats broke their party blockade to vote with Republicans. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates. The New York Times, November 9, 2025. 5 senators who normally vote with the Democratic Party spoke at a news conference at Capitol Hill on Sunday night to explain why they voted with Republicans. Senate moves closer to ending shutdown. 8 senators broke from the Democratic caucus and agreed to a deal, giving Republicans the 60 votes they needed to end the government shutdown. The measure still needs to be voted on in both chambers of Congress. The 60-40 vote paved the way for the spending agreement to begin making its way through Congress, where it would still need to be debated and passed by the Senate, win approval in the House, and be signed by President Trump to bring the shutdown to a close. 8 senators in the Democratic caucus voted to advance the measure, which would fund most federal agencies through January. That indicated there were enough votes to end weeks of gridlock that has shuttered the government for 40 days, leaving hundreds of thousands of federal workers furloughed, millions of Americans at risk of losing food assistance, and millions more facing air travel disruptions. The deal came with a commitment from Senator John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, and the majority leader to allow a vote in December on extending the expiring health insurance tax credits for a year. Such a bill has appeared all but certain to die in the Republican-led Congress. The Democratic defectors' decision allowed Republicans who have been unable to push through a temporary spending bill over Democratic opposition to finally cobble together the 60 votes needed to do so. Though reopening the government could still take some time, Senator Angus King, a Maine independent who caucuses with Democrats and was one of the lead negotiators of the deal, said that the length of the shutdown and the pain it was inflicting on Americans had changed the calculus for some of his colleagues, pushing them to support a deal with Republicans that would reopen the government without the extension of Affordable Care Act subsidies. "I think people were saying we are not going to get what we want, although we still have a chance," King said, noting the Thune commitment to hold a vote on the matter. But in the meantime, a lot of people are being hurt. One critical Democratic convert, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, said on Sunday evening that he was backing the deal after securing the provision in the temporary spending bill to reverse layoffs made during the shutdown and ensure furloughed workers would receive back pay. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the Democratic leader who had held his party together for more than a month making that case, opposed the deal. Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York, the minority leader, also said that House Democrats would not back any such deal. Trump and the Republican Party own the toxic mess they have created in our country, and the American people know it still were the plan to pass the Senate. House Democrats would have no chance of defeating it if Republicans held together and support. The core of the compromise includes a new stopgap measure that would fund the government through January, plus 3 separate spending bills to cover programs related to agriculture, military, construction, and legislative agencies for most of 2026, but would not include any guarantees on extending the Affordable Care Act health insurance subsidies. Senator Bernie Sanders, the Vermont independent who caucuses with Democrats, said as he headed into the meeting that voting to reopen the government without a guarantee would be a policy and political disaster. Senator Alyssa Slotkin, Democrat of Michigan, who was initially involved in the bipartisan talks, also did not sound inclined to back a deal. "I always said we have got to do something concrete on healthcare, and it is hard to see how that happened," she said. For in Alaska and Hawaii, higher food prices intensified SNAP anxiety. Some residents are receiving benefits, but the uncertainty over the past weeks has burdened many in the 2 states where the cost of food is the highest in the nation. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates. The New York Times, November 9, 2025. When a 30-year-old woman in Anchorage, Alaska, learned that she likely would not get all of her November food stamp benefits, she stocked up on staples like big bags of rice and dried beans. Though the 30-year-old woman does not have children, she provides childcare in her home, feeding 2 boys and a toddler on a federal benefit meant for 1 adult. Once November 1st arrived without the funds, Ms. Edwards started eating less and skipped the large box of electrolyte drink mixes she normally bought to help with health conditions that include anemia. In October, she said, "I just started rationing halfway through the month. For several weeks, more than 40 million Americans have been facing uncertainty over the status of federal food assistance through the SNAP program. Those worries have been especially sharp for residents of Alaska and Hawaii, the 2 states with the highest food costs in the nation. Many states, including Hawaii, have taken steps to help SNAP recipients by tapping into state funds or shifting money around to make up for the cutoff, at least temporarily. Although there were signs on Sunday night that Republicans and Democrats might be able to reach a compromise to end the government shutdown, the concerns of SNAP recipients far from Washington were not likely to be fully eased until a final deal was official and their payments were back to normal, according to the most recent report by the USDA, the agency that administers SNAP. A thrifty household of 4 could eat on $999.50 a month in the 48 contiguous states. But the cost is nearly 28% higher in Alaska and nearly 51% higher in Hawaii. The August report said prices can vary widely at supermarkets, but at one store in Honolulu a gallon of milk was $9.19. Food is more expensive in those states largely because it costs more to bring it there. Gov. Mike Dunleavy of Alaska has said that the state imports 95% of its food from other places, much of it coming to the Anchorage port of Alaska by barge a few times a week. New tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada add to these costs. In the remote communities dotting the islands and fjords of southeast Alaska, many towns rely on a single grocery store supplied by food shipped in overwater. Subsistence, hunting, fishing, and berry picking also play a big role in the diets of rural Alaskans, but far-flung communities like Nome and Kodiak still rely on grocery store staples too. The state has pledged to provide weekly benefits and have the State Department of Health work with food banks to help those in need, but it was unclear on Sunday how much funding SNAP recipients would receive for the entire month. The Anchorage woman said she did not know precisely what her monthly SNAP benefit was, but that it is around $370 or $380 a month. On Sunday, she said she had received $193 so far, with November SNAP payments ensnared more. Residents have been turning to the food banks of Alaska for a lifeline, but even before that, things had been getting more difficult for the pantries in the Anchorage network because the cost of food was up along with the cost of freight. The emergency food system in Alaska is pretty fragile, but that is because the entire food system in Alaska is pretty fragile. In Hawaii, 85 to 90% of the food is imported, according to a report by the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. The cost of food is astronomical. The state created a special fund to help make up for lost federal benefits, and last week it announced that November recipients would receive their full monthly payment. Governor Josh Green also directed a $2 million infusion to the food banks of Hawaii. The 32-year-old woman, who lives with her husband in Pahoa on the Big Island of Hawaii, said she was concerned because she had not received her household monthly SNAP benefit of $450 yet, even though the state had said it was working to load her card when the government shutdown began in October. The woman from Pahoa, Hawaii, began cutting back on her calories to as little as 800 per day. She said she was grateful for the assistance, but added that $450 for two people to get groceries in Hawaii was challenging. Potato chips are about $8 a bag, and bread can be as much as $10 a loaf. She said that she used to be able to get locally grown produce at half the cost with her SNAP benefits, but as grocery prices have gone up across the country, so have the fruits and vegetables grown by nearby farmers. The couple are trying to leave Hawaii. The costs here are just crushing, she said. In Juneau, Alaska, an 87-year-old woman said on Sunday that her SNAP benefits had not arrived so far. She said she was avoiding going to the grocery store as much as possible, adding that she was using spare food in her freezer, leftover potatoes from her garden and eggs from chickens. She kept the prices in Juneau are high even relative to other parts of the state, like Anchorage, she said. And she knows that a trip to the grocery store could quickly exhaust her limited funds. The only way we can get groceries is on barges that come from Seattle, so it is very expensive. In Anchorage, a 43-year-old single mother who has a master's degree in conservation biology and receives SNAP benefits said that she went to Costco to load up on things that can last: sardines, tuna fish, and seaweed, which she said she and her daughter eat frequently. The 43-year-old woman said she was terrified about what was happening with SNAP, but she tried to remain hopeful. She was planning to have dinner on Sunday with other SNAP recipients where they could brainstorm ways to get by. I see a change coming, she said, fighting back tears. 5 United Kingdom. 2 top BBC leaders quit over editing of Trump documentary. The abrupt moves followed furor over claims that a documentary had misleadingly edited footage of the Trump speech before the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. The New York Times, November 9, 2025. 2 of the top executives of the BBC resigned abruptly on Sunday, following a report suggesting the public service broadcaster had misleadingly edited a speech by President Trump that preceded the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. The surprise resignation of the Director General Tim Davie and Deborah Turnus, the chief executive of BBC News, came several days after a UK newspaper published details of a leaked internal memo arguing that a BBC Panorama documentary had juxtaposed comments by Trump in a way that made it appear that he had explicitly encouraged the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Ms. Turnus said that the ongoing controversy around the panorama on President Trump has reached a stage where it is causing damage to the BBC, an institution that I love. She said that the buck stops with me and conceded that mistakes have been made, but insisted that recent allegations that BBC News is institutionally biased are wrong. Trump welcomed the resignations in a post on his Truth Social account. With about 21,000 employees, the BBC calls itself the leading public service broadcaster in the world and is funded primarily from a license fee paid by Britons who watch TV, supplemented by commercial revenue. It produces a huge range of material from news to entertainment and has reached outside Britain through its international broadcasting operations. Pressure had been building on Davie and senior management of the BBC after the White House press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, reacting to the leaked memo, accused the broadcaster of being purposefully dishonest over its depiction of the Capitol Hill insurrection. The leaked memo was written by Michael Prescott, a former journalist who until June was an independent external advisor to the Editorial Standards Committee of the broadcaster. The documentary, called Trump: A Second Chance, was broadcast last year, and in one section spliced together footage from comments Trump made about 50 minutes apart. Davie was Director General for 5 years and survived a number of other crises at the broadcaster, earning the nickname Teflon Tim. The BBC senior leadership was widely expected to issue an apology in front of a parliamentary committee on Monday over the documentary about President Trump, and Davie appears to have calculated that his position was becoming untenable. Some of the BBC senior staff have said they believe that the broadcaster is under attack from partisan opponents. A presenter on Today, the flagship morning radio show, said there is a political campaign by people who want to destroy the organization. In a statement, Kemi Badenoch, leader of the main opposition Conservative Party, welcomed the resignations, but added that the Prescott report exposed institutional bias that cannot be swept away with 2 resignations. Strong action must be taken on all the issues it raised on social media. Trump Press Secretary Leavitt reacted to the Davie resignation by posting screenshots of 2 news articles. The first reading: Trump goes to war with fake news. BBC. The second from the website of the BBC on Sunday, reporting Tim Davie resigns as BBC Director General over Trump. Edit: above the first article, Ms. Leavitt wrote shot above the second chaser Rosep view. Apparently Leavitt was referring to alcoholic drinks. Back to the article. In response, Ed Davie, leader of the centrist Liberal Democrat Party of Britain, wrote also on social media to see the Trump White House claiming credit for downfall of Davie of the BBC and attacking the BBC should worry us all.
Red Green Fox here. The quick red green fox jumped over the barriers to clean air. Red Green Fox here. Ready to sing to you the names of the 2025 major wood-burning biomass industry subsidy opponents. 1. Biofuel Watch. 2. Bulkley Valley Stewardship Coalition of British Columbia, Canada. 3. Kommite Schön Luft, which means Beautiful Air Committee in German. 4. Dogwood Alliance. 5. Equity Group Foundation, nicknamed EGF. 6. Environmental Paper Network, nicknamed EPN. 7. Natural Resources Defense Council, nicknamed NRDC. 8. Prakaunia Narzexwisistik Istit, which means Workshop for All Beings in Polish. 9. Rachel Carson Council. 10. Solutions for Our Climate, nicknamed SFOC.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosep view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosep view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.